emergency fix. So, the first question.
Are you at all involved?
Could be worse. Could have been a couple of helicopters.
Doctors case against
Especially Coast Guard helicopters.
they're using basically they're upset because they couldn't practice their craft, of course. But their argument is that the 1908 Constitution essentially rendered the 1945 law null.
I guess I'm vaguely familiar with the case you're talking about. A couple of things though. Our 1908 Constitution was replaced by our 1963 Constitution. So, to the extent that anything would be different between the two, anything from the 1908 Constitution wouldn't be in place anymore.
But how it affected the 1945 enacting the 1945 law, which Whitmer has used to basically claim sole power of all things. In other words, they're using the federal told the Supreme Court to basically take this case. They must decide on this, whether or not the 1945 law is actually legitimate as it was enacted under the 1908 Constitution.
Oh, I didn't read that to be. I mean, I haven't seen the actual question that was certified to the Supreme Court. What I did see was the order that came down in the case that directed the parties to essentially halt what they were doing because the federal court judge wanted the Michigan Supreme Court to kind of address the issue, but based on what I saw, it had nothing to do with the Emergency Powers of Governor Act of 1945 specifically. It was the entirety of emergency powers that are being at issue here because not everybody, the governor and attorney general and some other individuals are trying to focus on the Emergency Management Act or the Emergency Powers of Governor Act, but totally separate from each other, and that's not how our laws work. So we can't just, address the Emergency Powers of Governor Act of 1945 as though it exists in a vacuum without the 1976 statute, because they're both on the books today. And quite frankly, the 1976 law is far worse than the 1945 law in a variety of aspects. I did a Facebook Live event or video on that 2 days ago because we have all these different petitions out there, and one is to repeal the 1945 Act, which I wouldn't argue against, but it's not going to fix everything. So the state constitution of 1963, which is our current constitution, but for any amendments that have been made since then, it didn't negate or immediately override any laws that were written before then. And as far as emergency powers go, to the main points of whether the 1945 Emergency Powers of Governor Act would be enforceable now, really relate to a couple different things. One is whether it's constitutional for a governor to exercise legislative powers, essentially to create laws to restrict the people. Whether the government in any branch would get more powers just because it's an emergency, state of emergency or not. And simply put, whether it's the 1908 version or the 1963 version that's currently in place, or the U.S. Constitution, none of those provide any branch of government to have any additional powers simply because it's a time of emergency. So, to the extent that any statute would try to go above and beyond that in giving a governor or a legislature or anyone else power, it's not enforceable. So I don't understand why certain courts in our state and certain attorneys and legislators are acting like it's this big complicated deal, because it's not. It's pretty darn simple. The Constitution doesn't allow that to happen, period. So trying to remember what the other aspect was that we were just talking about. I guess the drive is starting to get to me. Oh, well, yeah, so executive orders cannot, so emergency powers, whether it's through the 1945 Act or the 1976 Act, an important aspect would be that a governor should be allowed in a time of emergency to be able to reorganize the branch of the executive government as she deems fit to or necessary to coordinate emergency resources and efforts and things like that. And so where something would ordinarily have to go through some sort of longer procedural, thing, she's allowed to speed up that process to be able to coordinate efforts and get resources to places that need to be, rendered aid. But outside of that, emergency powers are not, it's not appropriate to use emergency powers to try to control the people in any way. And so I don't have the specifics of the 1976 statute with me. Apparently I don't have internet signal almost anywhere I drive these days, which makes it not very efficient for use of my time for hours a day. But there's some provisions of the 1976 Act, for example, that basically put it, not only do you have to follow any kind of executive orders supposedly put out by the governor in times of emergency, but you have to, it's worded in such a way that if you do anything that's not basically putting enough effort and energy into helping whatever she deems as necessary to resolve the situation, you can be punished under the law. Also, they can commandeer your house, your business, any other property, and use it, supposedly, under the 1976 Act, this is the language of the Act, to take it and use it, and then not necessarily even compensate you for it. If they have considered it to be you volunteering of your property, they don't have to compensate you for it, supposedly. Another part of how the Constitution was just kind of ignored. And there's several other provisions, so in terms of forcing people to provide some sort of services, I'm trying to remember the exact wording, personal services I think is what it was called. It says right in the 1976 Act that they can not only force you to do that in times of emergency, that where the governor deems it necessary, but they don't necessarily have to compensate you for it. You have to meet this high burden of proof to prove that if you were forced to provide some sort of services during this emergency, then they should have to pay you. So, and those are just some of those strange things that are in there that I can't wrap my mind around. Why our legislature is fighting so hard to push this 1945 repeal when the 1976 Act does all of those things. And when I first started this, I was thinking, when I first started fighting this issue, I knew in March something was wrong. I knew on March 12th at 11:15 p.m. when the governor came on the TV station, and I'm glad my kids are sleeping because I was yelling and swearing at the TV. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how wrong. I felt it, that it was big. It was bigger than something I'd ever experienced in my life before, but I didn't know, I couldn't put words to it yet. We didn't know what was to come. And unfortunately now, I think we do know what we're dealing with, which I guess is good and bad. We know how to fight it, but we still have to fight it. It's the bad news. So it's just absurd to me that we're going to put all that effort and collect all the signatures and do all that to take away the 1945 law when it's not part of the problem. And so where I was going with that a minute ago is that when I got into this, I was thinking, well, as long as they don't give her more than the 28 days, because I just feel like they shouldn't have given her that anyway, but the law says it. And I've been an advocate of the Constitution all along, but it didn't even occur to me to think of, well, it says 28 days in the law, but is that even really allowed? And the more I think about it now, and the fact that I think about Senate Bill 858, which is the one she ended up vetoing on April 30th, the way they modified it, Senate Bill 858, as it passed both the House and the Senate, ended up being a monstrosity, something that didn't even do what the original bill set out to do that Tom Barrett, introduced. Originally, the bill was designed to reduce the 28-day time period down to 14 days, and by the time they were all said and done with it, they put back in the 28 days, and then they codified 29 of her executive orders, which at that point was, I think, more than half. I mean, by now, last I checked, she has 131 executive orders, so in all fairness, 6 of those this year have nothing to do with coronavirus, but 125 of them do. So anyway, it codified 29 of the executive orders and went outside of the executive orders to mandate the wearing of masks. There was no medical exemption in there, and it made it the onus of the business owners to enforce that requirement. So anyway, this whole argument in the Supreme Court and in this whole, like, all the things that they've been doing is the governor's not allowed to do what she's doing because it's our power, as in the legislature. How dare that branch of government take away our branch's rights to do things? Hello? What about the people? I think we have sovereign power here, not you. And that's why I had to bust my butt to file a brief, especially, when we were writing this petition, and I'm finishing it up on a Friday, and of course, Kevin Skinner was like so excited about it that he announced to everyone on Facebook I would be doing a Facebook Live to announce about it that night, and I'm like, dude, you didn't even tell me you did that. But now that you told people, I guess I gotta try to do a video. So we finish up, get everything to the printer, and do the Facebook Live, and the next day I had strangers I'd never even met at my door there to pick up petitions to help start circulating, and some of them drove for hours, and I hadn't even had the petitions delivered to my house yet. So it was a great thing to have and to see, but went right from that to, by Monday I'm like, okay, I really should probably write a brief on this case that the legislature has against the governor, and come to find out that night at 11 o'clock at night that conveniently the Supreme Court's website for filing was going to go down at 4 p.m. the next day. Huh. Like they didn't want any more people having a say on what was going on. So that's the night I stayed up literally all night long and finished the brief as best I could, and traveled across the state and ended up in another stranger's house and was trying to bring petitions and give them a presentation about this amendment, and unfortunately made them wait for like an hour and 15 minutes past that point because my internet doesn't work when I'm on the road, and I had to file this thing by 4 p.m. So by 4:00, right on the dot, her internet finally connected in just the right way that I got the whole thing filed. But the whole point being, in my brief, I argue that for months, since before I even thought about doing this amendment, I have felt it necessary to go out completely outside of my comfort zone. Standing with a mic in front of a camera and videos and people I don't know is really not my thing. Doing Facebook Live videos, especially while getting a haircut and some other things, is really not my comfort level either. But I'm doing this because I took an oath to defend the U.S. and Michigan constitutions, and it seems like maybe 2 or 3 other people in the whole state are doing that. And I'm appalled. I'm just absolutely appalled. So, as I said in the brief to the Supreme Court and the one I filed this week in the Court of Appeals, I've been answering the questions of thousands of people all across the state every single week, because somebody's supposed to, and nobody else is as far as I can tell. Or the answers they're given are not the truth, and they're not based in the Constitution, and they're not based in the fact that God gave us our rights and the government can't take them away. So I filed the brief so we're not having the court decide between, well, does the governor have all the power to control us, or does the legislature have all the power to control us? Instead, it's going to be, there's that third option, which is we the people have the power to control us, and that's it. So anyway, I'm hoping some common sense can come through on that. And quite frankly, there's really good words that came out of that. Their denial to take the case right now some of the Supreme Court justices had some amazing things to say, and I mentioned some of them this last Thursday when I was at the Medical Freedom Rally at the state capitol. It's just some great stuff. I ended up putting some, oh, no wonder why that dog caught my attention, because it's mine. So, I ended up putting some of the very words from those, dissenting or concurring opinions right in my brief to the Court of Appeals, because they pointed out some amazing things, that 10 million lives are being impacted, the civil liberties of each of us, the economic liberties, one of the justices, I want to say it was Viviano, pointed out that it's the rights of not only every single resident of the state and employer and business owner of the state, but every single person who comes to visit or pass through the state of Michigan during the time that all this craziness is in effect. And that's exactly the way that it is. And I feel like I've gone to a different country when I go to different parts around the state right now. I go to, I was in Detroit yesterday at Hart Plaza at a rally, and one of my new best friends, a long-lost twin named Frank, he, amazing guy, he's driving me all over the state when my husband's working, and that way I can type on briefs while he's driving, that kind of thing. I wish that was a joke. It's actually true. But anyway, so we drove over there, and we get there, and of course I drink like 4,000 of these bottles of water a day, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom, right? So we pull up, and there's a cop sitting on the side of the road and taking a nap, watching our rally, because it's so dangerous, we're awful people. And yeah, well, we had those awful militiamen there too to cause trouble or protect us, however you view it. And anyway, so I asked him, sir, can you tell me where a restroom is? Because I don't really know this area of Detroit. And he said, well, there's some restaurants and hotels just right up the road. So I said, okay. So we went to the nearest restaurant/hotel, one of those buildings that has a multitude of things going on in it, kind of like a mall, I guess you could say, but more like skyscraper version. Anyway, I walk in, and there's signs, of course, and you have to wear masks, like plastered all over everything, and half the doors are locked, and there's signs that say no public restroom, and I'm like, what do people do? I mean, you can't not have to go to the bathroom when you gotta go to the bathroom. It's not a choice. So, I continue to walk through this building, because it's, like I said, there's restaurants, there's, it's a hotel, there's shops later on, so I go through this one set of glass doors, and I'm like, okay, well, there's a good chance I'm going to get stuck on the other side, because maybe they're locked to get into the hotel. And so I went out, and sure enough, they were locked. And so I'm looking at there's different stores and whatnot, and I asked about a restroom, and of course all of them are wearing, like every single human was wearing a mask. And I thought, small children, adults, a guy in a wheelchair with with oxygen, whatever the thing is, whatever. And I literally said to him, sir, I am really concerned about your health. Have you in fact talked to a physician specifically about your ability to get enough oxygen when you were wearing that mask? And he said he had. Sad thing is I believe him, because I think I've seen personally enough physicians that look, they fell off the rocket. I don't even know how to say that. They don't know what medicine is anymore. But anyway, so here's the thing. Because of coronavirus and all the common sense we're seeing with it, that was sarcasm in case you couldn't quite tell. There's all these glass doors, and I'm on the main level of this big building, and so I'm trying to just get out to get back to my friend's car, and quite frankly I wanted to try to go back in to see if I could get somebody to let me use the bathroom. Couldn't get out because the doors were locked. So I tried one, tried another one, tried another one. I finally found one of like the 6 doors that wasn't locked. How is that not a fire code problem? You can't get out of a building because of coronavirus? I don't even know what to say. The stupidity. All of these people need to be held accountable. I want to hold the fire marshals accountable. Why are they not seeing that as a problem? So anyway, walked all the way around. I'm sure my friend got a kick out of this because I'm trotting around like around the whole building and back in the front door, and he's probably just like, what just happened there? And I go back in and I plead my case with the woman who works at the hotel front desk, and she gives me some story about, well, it's actually the restaurant's bathroom. Wait, the bathroom over there in the hotel. You're saying I have to go get a key from the restaurant that's over there, and I'm talking to you right here. All right, whatever. And of course, everybody's wearing masks, and I'm looked at like I'm murdering someone because I'm standing there trying to breathe air. And then as I finally am allowed to use the restroom and go in and, you know, unlock the door and whatever, and once I get into the restroom, I'm thinking, okay, so we're supposed to be using like super good hygiene with coronavirus. Pretty sure that includes washing your hands. Probably includes, you know, like going to the bathroom when you need to. I don't know, just thinking about that. And yet we're telling people all across the city of Detroit, among many other areas, that you can't use the bathroom? And we're locking doors so people can't get outside because it's a time of emergency. Man, I don't even know what to say to that. So, I mean, and one of the ladies that was working in one of the stores said to me, literally, everything in Detroit is locked up. There are no public restrooms anywhere. How does that help anyone? I'm dumbfounded. So, luckily I was eventually able to use the restroom and eat food in the city without having to wear a mask or whatever. I never thought that day would come. I thought I lived in the United States of America, where I could go to the bathroom and I could order and pay for and eat food without having to cover my face. I'm pretty sure that just 6 months ago, that was something where we looked at other countries and said, you make your people cover their faces? Then, you know, how can you do that? Is that not a human rights violation or whatever? I mean, I never thought that would happen here, where I'm looked at as a criminal because I want to breathe fresh air. Unfortunately, that's not even the fight that I can take on right now. I have people, literally dozens, if not hundreds, literally, asking me every single day about, can I sue Menards? Can I, you know, help them with their orthodontist who is refusing, you know, treatment without the masks? My college intern was offered her position back, a paid job, because what we do, we're not paid. But she would have to wear a mask. And the restaurant where she also worked, I guess they're not even going to have Ruth Chris's, is that, am I saying that right? Super fancy restaurants apparently not even going to have wait staff anymore. Not sure how that's going to work, but she was told they're just not going to have anybody back for wait staff. Well, at least she doesn't have to wear a mask, I guess. And I was originally told, you know, I made my Secretary of State, my birthday's on Friday. Thank you. I almost didn't realize it. It's kind of sad I missed Mother's Day because that was the day I was finally sending out the letter to all the sheriffs, police officers, prosecuting attorneys, and city attorneys across the state of Michigan, telling them how it's illegal for them to enforce these executive orders. But anyway, so I kind of missed May. I remember doing a Facebook Live video at one point, and I was like, I don't remember when it was. It was either the end of May or the beginning of June, and I went, wait, what? It's really past, like, it does, because and twiddling their thumbs, and I was fighting the government because I'm just kind of that stubborn personality that doesn't go away. What's that?
Glad you're stubborn. God bless you.
Can you tell my parents that? And my husband.
Well, you're a bad rally behind you.
My maiden name is Reed. Yes. So I will say my dad 100% supports me in this. He's awesome. He's our Midland County captain. He's a distribution point for our petitions. He drove around at the very beginning before, when we were still trying to get captains in every area of the state. He was driving around to deliver petitions to people all over the state for us. I mean, a couple weekends ago when we were up in Kalkaska and Traverse City, he didn't make it to the Traverse City thing, but he made it to the Kalkaska thing. he drove all the way from Midland just to see me for a little bit and hang out with us and get some petitions and give us the signed ones. And anyway, so it's awesome. But he probably could still be reminded that my stubbornness was always for a purpose. So, 14 rabbit trails later, I have no idea what I started off telling you guys, but hopefully I ended up answering the one question that I took so far. So who has the next question? Yeah?
Providing the petitions get past the Board of Commissioners, what's the flow of implementing this? What will it look like in the time frame?
So remember that second part of your question, which might feel like that's the main part of your question, because the first part is actually super important. So the Board of State Canvassers is a puzzle in getting this on the ballot. But in 2018, we had, I want to say we had 3 ballot initiatives that year that would change the Constitution, and one of them being the Voters Not Politicians piece that changed how we do redistricting, and it added 4,250 words to our state constitution. I voted no, but an important point about that is that, and I initially signed, I think I initially signed the petition to get it on the ballot because, you know, the concept sounded good to me, and quite honestly, the person who had me sign it, I did not realize that I wasn't seeing the whole thing, and that's a huge problem, but that's why I make sure that when I go to these events that we have our circulators. I check, you know, I'm looking, okay, oh, yep, we got the second page, everything's touching, you know, so everybody can read the whole thing. With ours, we have ours right on, you know, right on our website, available for people, as well as it's on the Secretary of State's website too. But I want to make sure that everybody knows that they can read it, and they should read it. Anyway, so with that court case, or with that situation, the Voters Not Politicians effort was challenged by Citizens Protecting Michigan's Constitution. And it went to the Supreme Court, and I want to say July 31st, 2018 is when the Michigan Supreme Court, the four justice majority that wrote that opinion, by the way, the 4 of them are still justices on the court today. So I think it's a pretty good indication of what they would do today. But they made it clear that any prior attempts to basically overinflate the restrictions upon doing these constitutional amendments, or to allow additional restrictions where they were not specifically in the Constitution, and to some degree in the state statutes, that wasn't going to be allowed anymore, because that's not the point of us being able to do this. That's not within the spirit of our Constitution. In fact, they pointed out so many awesome things in that very court from that court case ended up in the language of our petition. So it's too bad I can't remember the exact things that ended up in there, but they went over the foundations and functions of government in there. And the funny thing is, that's part of what we're clarifying for people. So we don't have to look to a court case to have the government understand what the restrictions are upon them. We can have everything all in one nice, neat little package in the Constitution. They went into what the job of the Constitution is, that it is to create our government, but it's also to, well, you know what? I might have what I'm trying to reinvent the wheel here. I think I have it in front of me. I have everything else here. I have every other law and note known to man on constitutional amendments right in front of me. So you can ask me any other questions apparently, except for relating to that. At any rate, it's they go into good detail though the fact that our state constitution, so our U.S. Constitution guarantees to us a Republican form of government in Article 4, Section 4 of our national constitution. And so anything that our state constitution does to contradict or contravene that, it's not okay. It's not constitutional. Because our U.S. Constitution, as it says, I want to say in Article 6, I should know this by now, but I'm mixing them all up in my head. It says right in the Constitution that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And in Marbury versus Madison, of course, they went on to expand upon that just a tiny bit, but to reiterate that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And so to the extent that you have a law that goes outside of or in contradiction to that, it's like it doesn't even exist. Well, our government, including many judges, have seemed to have forgotten that main point. So anyway, our Supreme Court justices in the 2018 case pointed out that, we have this Republican form of government, but our state, more than any other state, has significant elements of pure democracy in a way that emphasizes how we truly have a government by the people and how the people hold the sovereign power. And they point out how we have, right in our Constitution, the ability to do recalls, and we can do repeals, and we can do, citizen-initiated legislation, and we can do constitutional amendments. And they listed several of those elements. In my brief to the Supreme Court and then this week to the Court of Appeals, I also pulled in or discussed how we have the ability to do, there's term limits on judges and different people, serving in our government. There's all kinds of other provisions anyway that limit the government and expand and reinforce that it's us, it's we the people that control things. So anyway, so their point with that is this isn't just some isolated piece to look at in a vacuum, this idea of doing a constitutional amendment. It is part and parcel with the whole concept that our government is a government by the people. And so they said, it has to be held with, high respect and high regard, and it shouldn't be just, laden with all kinds of unnecessary requirements and burdening the people from utilizing what's, one of the rights that we have in our Constitution. So they even talked about the concept that some of the way, some of the people have talked about some constitutional advocates, some people I've looked up to for years, some experts in the field, people who have served in office or who, who are attorneys or whatever, have been fighting against what we're doing here, this petition, and saying it's not constitutional or it's not legal or it's never going to make it or whatever. They just need to read some of the more recent stuff, because in this case, the court made it very clear that all these prior ways of shutting down proposed constitutional amendments, they likened it to, their words were a judicial gloss. Sounds really goofy. They basically said, kid you not, that those kinds of ways of describing how things work are like a spray-on tan. And I forget exactly why that kind of made sense to say it in that way. Maybe it never did, because us legal nerds tend to say things that most people don't really quite find funny. But the whole point is, just because you say something is precedent over and over again, just because you say something is, super important, or you, whatever, use all italics or underline it or whatever, doesn't mean that it's true. So the fact is, we have to go to the words of the Constitution itself, and some of those concepts and the wording and how they described it is how I put it right into the constitutional amendment. Their job as the judicial branch is to, it's to interpret the law, but the important piece to that is, if it's a matter of reading the language and it's as black and white as it can possibly be, the interpretation ends there. There's no need to try to redefine it or reinvent the wheel, so to speak. If the words of the Constitution are as plain as day, you stop at the period and you just move on and accept what that sentence says. And so they kind of point that out in this decision. So what their point was is that the Constitution doesn't add, a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through, but for, they said, the biggest hoop you have to jump through is getting the signatures. And at this point, with the numbers of the last gubernatorial election here in Michigan, it's 425,059 signatures that we need, that are good signatures to get it on the ballot. So to the extent that people have been arguing that, the language is going to be turned down by the Secretary of State or the Board of State Canvassers or whomever, I say to them, they don't have a right. I don't have to prove I have the right to do this. They have to prove that I have stepped beyond some sort of limitation placed upon me in the Constitution in doing so. And they can't do that. And so what is astounding to me is all these freedom fighters that have been on the side of justice and freedom and we the people for all these years are all of a sudden coming out and saying, but this is just not how it works. You just can't do this. It's not going to go through. And to them I say, show me the statute I broke. Show me the constitutional provision that says I did it wrong. If you can't, shut your mouth, because you're not helping our cause for freedom. So I'd be more than happy to openly debate anybody who says that we're doing it the wrong way. I'd love to. In fact, I went on Tyrone X's radio show this week, and he's kind of got an interesting personality, if you know him. And so we've known him for 6 years maybe. I mean, back when we met him, back when his beautiful wife was with us here on Earth, and wonderful woman. Anyway, so it's not like somebody we just met yesterday. So I called in this week because we saw him 2 weeks ago at one of the events on the east side of the state. It's all Detroit to me. Anything past Lansing is Detroit. He was, I went to this event, and it was a congressional candidate doing a happy birthday President Trump, event. And so I walk up thinking that there's all these kind of booths and tables, canopies and whatnot. I was like, oh, there's all kinds of stuff, cool. Oh my gosh, look at that one. I said, Mike, look at that table right there on the outside of one of these canopies. It says Restore Freedom. That's so cool to see. I wrote that. And so we walk up to it. As we get closer, I look at the first canopy and all the tables underneath that, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that one says Restore Freedom too. Wow. And then I go to the next canopy and wait a second, that says Restore Freedom as well? And then the table after, every single booth and table I saw at the whole event was our circulators out there collecting signatures. It was phenomenal. And that event had, oh my gosh, 3,000 people that came in and out. I mean, it was, I can't even, who knows. It was a great event. Anyway, I saw him there for the first time in person in a long time. And I've been on his show, since all this craziness has been happening, but not necessarily about the petition. So he saw it, he seemed super excited, and said he wanted to review the language in full, and I said, absolutely, go for it. So anyway, it had been a week and a half, I guess. Time flies when you're traveling around the state. And so I finally called in and talked to him about it, and he was a little short with me. And wanted me to give him a summary of the entire constitutional amendment in 25 words or less, he said. And as I started to give him the 25 words, and I was trying to be very cognizant of the time frame in which he was wanting me to do this, he cuts me off and he wanted me to give specifics. In 25 words? And then he wanted me, my specifics were not good enough, he cut me off and wanted me to have examples of the specifics. Okay, well that's a little, that's impossible. I can't do all that in 25 words or less. And so anyway, he's saying basically I need to be able to, boil it down into sound bites that work for the radio or for the public. I mean, we're very give me now kind of people, right? I get that, but when you're trying to affect change in a positive and lasting way, you got to do it the right way. So he is a little abrupt with me, but in the end, he said he supports what we're doing, but just, wants us to be able to talk about it in 20 seconds or something, whatever the case was. And so I hang up with them a little frustrated, but no big deal. Come to find out, the very next caller is somebody who has her own radio show on his station on Saturdays for an hour. But she spent the entire time talking about how this petition is bad for freedom. And putrid, right? Is that the word, honey? It's putrid. And it gives the government more power. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Did she read it? Is it opposite day? Which one was she reading, maybe? So anyway, so it turns out she said that, basically she was open to me doing, a back and forth or dialogue or debate on her show this Saturday at 1 today. So I finally was given a phone number for her, and I sent her a text message in the car because I didn't have enough signal to carry on a phone conversation. And kind of said who I was and said, hey, I heard you wanted to grill me about the petition on your show. What time, do I need to call in? You going to call me? How does this work? And what it boils down to is she said she wants to have the whole hour today uninterrupted to be able to tell everyone in Michigan how horrible this petition is, because she has 6 pages of notes about how awful everything is in it. And then when I said, well, it seems crazy. Honestly, I think it's cowardly that you would want to do that. Be on the radio talking about how you advocate for freedom and that I'm trying to destroy it, when you don't, want the people to have the whole truth. You don't want to have two sides to this. I don't have anything to hide. Why should she have anything to hide? So then she responds to me and says that I have all the power, so I've been able to talk about my petition unchallenged for these few weeks, and she needs her turn to share her opinion with people. Of course, I had to remind her about all those special individuals that I just told you guys about a moment ago who are challenging it with zero basis whatsoever. And shared with her the funny thing is about power is that I don't have power. I'm not an office holder. I've been on Facebook and talking to people at rallies. I don't have money behind this, effort at all. I don't have a fancy title. I don't even wear fancy clothes most days. I'm very low key. You're lucky I brushed my hair before I got out of the car. But I said to her, you have a radio station. Don't you think that it would be important for people, if you're an advocate for we the people to make decisions and govern and rule, shouldn't we the people be given the opportunity to hear both sides to it? Well, never heard back from her after that. And we started to hear her show at 1 on the radio, and then it kind of cut out a little bit, and I said, you know what, just turn it off at this point. I just don't want to hear it. So, sad thing is, that's not the only time that's happened. Quite honestly, every single time someone has challenged me on this, they don't do it to my face. They don't do it in a public arena. Shoot, I've been on the steps of the Capitol talking about it who knows how many times at this point. They can't just walk up the stairs and go, okay, Catherine, let's have a debate on this. I mean, most of you, if not all of you, might know at this point, I have publicly challenged the Attorney General of the state of Michigan to a debate on the constitutionality of the Management Act and Emergency Powers of Governor Act of 1945. So, obviously, if I'm going to challenge the Attorney General, I'd be more than happy to challenge anybody else. We're about freedom, period. So, an apparent conservative club, the Greater Oakland Republicans Club, apparently has a judge who's a constitutional expert, and he's going to dissect my amendment in a Zoom meeting with whoever wants to join this. And it's going to be this whole, be informed before you sign kind of thing Monday. Yet, I was not invited to that meeting either. Huh. It just strikes me that a judge whose very job, whose powers, and all that are going to be directly impacted by this constitutional amendment. More information shared with the people, less ability to restrict the people in your courtroom, all kinds of other fun stuff. That he is going to be neutrally sharing his expert opinion on this. Interesting. Anyway, so to the extent that you guys can, share with everyone. If anyone challenges anything that's in here, ask them to call me directly. Text me, email me, chime in on a Facebook Live video, the ones I really hate doing. But the whole point is I want people to be informed. I want people to be encouraged. I want people to know that they can get their government back if we all work together. And I want people to be able to have their questions answered. I don't want anybody to feel stupid when they're trying to read the laws, or they are trying to understand the Constitution, or they're trying to hold their government accountable. All of us need to feel empowered to do so. And I've started picking on teenagers to make sure that they do know what's in the Bill of Rights. So if you're of that age, I'm coming after you to make sure you know. So anyway, the point is, I think there's too much undue emphasis on some assumptions some legislators, some attorneys, some whoever have been making and expressing directly towards me that this constitutional amendment is going to be somehow stopped at the Board of State Canvassers level. They don't have the right to do that. They'd actually have to prove specifically what is in the Michigan Constitution that I did that doesn't comply with the rules of the game, so to speak. And so since no one, literally no one, has been able to actually point out to anything that I've supposedly done wrong, I'm guessing at this point it means because I haven't. But it's not my petition. I mean, I want to take a step back and let you guys know. I mean, obviously I'm really awesome. But when I was given this directive, as someone who has never felt like, you know, I hear the voice of God telling me what to do, I've had general notions of what I need to do. Like in kindergarten, I knew I was going to be a lawyer, which I always thought that's how people plan their lives. I only recently realized how incredibly strange that is, especially since my youngest child just graduated from kindergarten. And I'm like, if she knew she was going to be whatever she is, you know, going to be, that just seems really odd. So now I know how special I really am. Hopefully in a good way. But when I had been asking and praying, you know, God, just give me the whole picture. I know I've been writing this letter to the legislators, or this letter to the prosecutors, or doing Facebook Live videos, or answering questions, or creating that website stopcovidchaos.com, or researching the stuff that the CDC has been putting out there to show how their numbers are actually not the truth, and how MDHHS helps to paint the picture of how the numbers on Michigan.gov are not correct. I mean, craziness. But I was like, God, just give me that whole big picture. What am I missing? And he gave me a list to write down of all the things that I'd be doing, and I looked at that when I was done writing it, and I was like, no way. You want me to write a brief in the Michigan Supreme Court? I did. You want me to write another appellate brief? Well, I've done that now too. You want me to write a constitutional amendment? How do you even do that? Like, is that even a thing? I didn't know. I looked it up that very day, and within 7 days, I fully researched it, drafted it, had a multitude of people review it. Not that many attorneys, though, I'm going to be honest, because the average person should be able to read it and understand it, and if the average person can't look at it and go, yeah, that makes sense to me, then it's a load of garbage. So, did have other attorneys working on it with me, don't get me wrong, because, you know, we wanted to make sure we were getting it right. But that kind of thing doesn't happen in the course of a week. It literally was exactly 7 days. So, anyway, that language, I was very blessed to be the vessel through which God, you know, was able to put it together, but it's not, I can't take the credit for it. So, at any rate, so to what seemed like a few tiny words to you probably when you said it, has been at a very important point because so many people are assuming it's not going to make it to that stage or past that stage. So when it does, and it gets on so the Constitution and the laws work together to basically say that you know, they have to validate the signatures, which they don't look at all 425,059 signatures. They have this algorithm, they scan them all in, they use this database, and they figure out what percentage they're going to look at. It doesn't appear to be any more than 4,000 of all of them that they're even going to look at. Does that seem insane to you? we're checking. We've already checked more than 4,000 of the signatures ourselves, but the government's not even going to do that before they try to say whether or not we can get on the ballot. But anyway, so they are going to check the sufficiency and the validity that way, and then basically pass it on. And then they cannot do it before the primary, which is August 4th. They cannot assign the number, so the proposal number, Prop 1, Prop 2. So sometime between then and 60 days prior to the election, the general election in November, that's the window they have. They have 1 month to announce the proposal number. And so at that point on, then we'll be able to advertise, tell people and, pay for that one commercial that our fundraising has been able to afford so far on that one news station up in the UP. Hey, all 25 viewers are going to see it though. It's going to be great. So, but in all seriousness, we're going to have to keep doing, not in a go nonstop kind of situation, but we're going to have to keep doing rallies all over the state. We're going to have to make sure people are talking at all of their community events and city council meetings and, political party meetings, whatever party that you're in, Constitution Party, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. We should all be for free. So talking to your neighbors and friends and your cousin and your coworker and everybody else, it's going to be a lot of that. It's going to be a lot of social media, sharing it on Facebook. Helps way more than you realize. Twitter, my 16-year-old son told me I should be using TikTok or whatever it's called. I'm like, dude, I don't even know Snapchat does. I'm not going to do that. So, but we're going to need help from everyone to get that word out. And anyway, so when we do get that simple majority vote on November 3rd, 45 days after that is when it will be enacted. And then what I did is I put in certain provisions because there is going to be a huge burden on the government, I guess if you want to call it that, to provide information to people, to make sure their websites are actually informative, that we know the names, the positions, the contact, basic official contact information for our government officials, that kind of thing, the basic job descriptions of some key, heads of departments and things like that. So in addition to that 45 days until it becomes enacted, some of the provisions will go into effect 30 days after that. So they have 75 days to get some of that information out for the public. Does that answer your question about when or? Okay. So 3 hours later, I finally answered. I'm so proud of myself. I am an attorney. And a woman. Right. Pay you by the minute. Or you pay me by the minute. So I promise I will try to answer the next question in less than 3 minutes. Less than 1 minute. I might have to talk like the Michael Machines guy. Does anybody else have any questions? Awesome.
I'm just curious, you addressed it here and there, hit other points, but why is this not a partisan issue?
Why is it not?
Not a partisan issue about freedom and transparency.
I feel like your question might be a little bit more than what's on the surface. Are you suggesting that it should be a partisan issue, or? Because it's definitely not a partisan issue, and I can tell you that because Republican leadership has told the legislators they're not allowed to come to any of our freedom rallies or signing events. And of course the Democrats don't like it either. So it's definitely not a partisan issue because none of the parties per se like it or support it, because it's going to take away power from the people who are used to holding all the power. So people that will be benefiting from the status quo are saying, absolutely not, this is horrible, you can't do this. So, you're doing something right when you're ticking off the Democrats and the Republicans at the same time.
If you're over the target, you catch the flag.
And I'm really proud of ticking them all off at the same time.
God bless.
And in fact, Kevin Skinner said to me yesterday that because, that was strange. Even the tree is mad at me. he said that, you know, the more serious, the more real this gets, especially when you have, you know, when it gets to the point of, okay, we've turned in enough signatures, you know, it's getting real for these people. He pointed out that, you know, the snakes are going to start coming out, and I mean, they already are, but that the threats are going to get real, and the personal attacks against me are going to get even more real. And, you know, discrediting the amounts of money, the millions of dollars they're going to dump into fighting this. Let's be realistic. They're going to dump millions, maybe billions of dollars against this. I know that. I mean, but no matter how high this mountain is that we're trying to move, if God's with us, we can move it. So that's the way I look at it. We have to be smart about it, absolutely. We have to have strategy. We have to. I'm not going to sit at, you know, home watching the last episode of Grey's Anatomy I never got to watch. I'm pretty sure it might be on Hulu, but who knows? I haven't seen the television in months. People say to me all the time, well, you know how there was something in the news? And I'm like, no, I don't. I was typing or on Facebook Live or doing whatever. So, but it's gonna get real. And he pointed out that, you know, he, in his opinion, and he's not the first one to say this to me. Several people have now said this to me, that they feel like I should have basically a security detail with me everywhere I go, because of they're concerned about the physical threats to my safety that we're going to have, especially when this gets on the ballot, you know. And that's probably true, but so far, I don't know, it's kind of cool. I'm not afraid about it. Maybe I should be, but I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I believe it will, which is why I really love having all my militia friends. And, you know, open carry friends, and so anyone who, you know, loves the Second Amendment, basically, those are the people I'm going to hang out with the most. But in all seriousness, I think they know, the other side knows that we're going to do this, that we have the people of the state of Michigan are ticked off all over the state. I mean, in the first 24 hours that we had somebody counting, you know, going through our petitions that we had received thus far, we already had at that point signatures in 79 of the 79 of the 83 counties in Michigan. What in the world? That's insane. That was before I went up to the UP and did a rally in Calumet. I mean, that's on the other side of Houghton Hancock, if you don't know, it's way up there. You know, 30-degree temperature difference in the same day between there and Traverse City in the same day. It's kind of crazy. So we're getting there, and it's amazing to see. But yeah, you're right. This is not a partisan issue. It's a freedom issue, absolutely. In fact, I am actively trying to reach out to Black Lives Matter leaders. I would love to sit down and talk to Black Lives Matter leaders, because I think those who are genuine in the movement, who do not like when government, police officers, or whomever, is when those individuals are violating rights, they would want to sign the petition. They would want to see that we want everyone to have their freedoms as guaranteed to us by the Constitution. And there's a provision right in there, I'm pointing because I see the petition right there, but I'm a very visual person. There's a provision in there that specifically spells out, if you're a public official and you're violating rights, you can't hide behind 14 different kinds of immunity anymore. If you've intentionally violated someone's rights under the Constitution, you have committed a misdemeanor in your first offense, with a $2,500 fine and some possible jail time. But if you've done it twice, you're immediately removed from office. You're prohibited from ever serving in office again, and you're going to have at least a $25,000 fine, and you could face up to 10 years in prison. This is serious. And I think whether it's, you know, any kind of advocacy group out there, whether it's Black Lives Matter or any other group, if we're true and wanting to secure rights, this is something that everybody can stand behind. So At any rate, that answers more. See, I was just trying to answer. I was being efficient. I was trying to answer 47 questions all in one at every time. So, what? Yeah, we're gonna go with that. I think it was. Any other questions, or even comments or concerns? I went toe to toe with a protester at the Calumet rally last weekend. That was interesting. He had a First Amendment right too, so I invited him, encouraged him to ask questions just like everybody else. He went overboard and kept repeating the same stuff despite me addressing him. Kind of shut it down at that point because I was wasting everyone's time, but surprisingly, that's when the entire crowd erupted with applause. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess they were waiting for me to shut them down. Who knew? But in all seriousness, anybody that has comments, questions, or concerns, I'll address them anytime. Absolutely. I apparently do it in my sleep sometimes too, so don't always, rely on the answer I give you if my eyes aren't quite open. Any comments? Any questions? Okay. Well, I will still be here for a while, and you can come up to me individually. There's an infinite amount of things that I could say about this. One important thing would be that we do need to have as many signatures back as possible by the 30th so that we can go through and validate all the signatures. But, I'd rather turn in 700,000 signatures knowing that I didn't check all of them than to turn in 430,000 knowing that I've checked a majority of them just in case there was something we didn't catch. So to the extent that there's events or rallies or anything going on this coming week because it's 4th of July, please don't, not go out and collect signatures. Feel free to go out and collect signatures all the way, through this week and just stay in touch with us so we can figure out how to best get those back right away. Because I will be turning them into the state the morning of July 6th. So we want to make sure that we've got everything as coordinated and organized as possible. But I don't want to turn down the tens of thousands I know we can get just this week alone during those events. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. I appreciate it.